They called her the undisputed queen of country music, a dynamo who could play nearly any instrument you put in front of her and won Entertainer of the Year twice. With a voice that could hush a rowdy bar and a charm that won over a nation, she completely rewrote the rules for women in country music. She wasn't just talented, she was bold, unapologetic, and completely in charge of her own career. Audiences adored her. The industry respected her. And for a long time, it truly seemed like Barbara Mandrell was unstoppable. But then, she vanished. Today, at 76 years old, the headlines and online gossip paint a grim picture of the country legend, claiming she's living a lonely, isolated life after stepping out of the spotlight. They say her life now is just plain sad, but what if that story has it all wrong? What if her disappearing act wasn't an ending, but the beginning of something better? We're about to uncover the real story of how Barbara Mandrell lives today, and it's a world away from the tragic tale you've heard. The story you think you know about her retreat from public life is built on a real tragedy, that much is true, but it misses the most crucial part of the story, her powerful, deliberate choice to walk away. This isn't a story about a star who faded out, it's about a woman who chose to live in a different kind of light. To understand the myth, you have to understand the legend. Barbara Ann Mandrell, born on Christmas Day in 1948, wasn't just another singer, she was a genuine musical prodigy. Growing up in a musical family, she learned to read music before she could even read words. By the time she was 5, she was playing the accordion in church. At 11, her father, Irby, took her to a music trade show in Chicago, where her mind-blowing skills on the steel guitar caught the attention of the one and only Chet Atkins and Joe Maphis. Maphis, a guitar legend himself, was so blown away he nicknamed her the Princess of Steel and made her a regular fixture in his Las Vegas show. Just imagine that, a preteen from Texas, already a seasoned pro sharing a Vegas stage. By 13, she was on the road with the Johnny Cash Show, playing steel guitar for superstars like Patsy Cline and George Jones. This wasn't some childhood hobby, it was her destiny. Her family soon put together the Mandrell family band, with her dad on vocals, her mom on piano, and a young drummer named Ken Dudney. That drummer would go on to become the love of her life. After a short-lived retirement in 1967 to be a Navy wife to Ken, the pull of the stage was just too strong. A visit to the Grand Ole Opry, where she watched Dolly Parton perform, reignited that fire. She turned to her father and said, "If you'll manage me, I want to get back into show business." His response? "I'll bet my last penny on you." It was a gamble that paid off, big time. She signed with Columbia Records in 1969 and started a run that would make history. Her sound was a game-changer, a fresh mix of traditional country with touches of R&B and soul, giving her a crossover appeal that was years ahead of its time. Hits like "Sleeping Single in a Double Bed" and her iconic cover of "If Loving You Is Wrong, I Don't Want to Be Right" shot up both the country and pop charts. She wasn't just a voice, she was a true entertainer. Her live shows were electrifying spectacles of pure energy, filled with choreographed routines, stunning costume changes, and Barbara herself effortlessly switching between the banjo, saxophone, bass, and of course, her legendary steel guitar. She lived by her own code of showmanship. "It's called show business," she famously said. "You need to show them something. Otherwise, they could sit at home and listen to your recordings." This mindset launched her to the very top of the industry. In 1980 and 1981, she won the Country Music Association's Entertainer of the Year award, becoming the first artist in history to win it 2 years in a row. At the same time, she, along with her sisters Louise and Earlene, conquered television with Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell Sisters, a variety show that pulled in an incredible 40 million viewers every week. The show was a cultural sensation, a happy blend of music, comedy, and family that beamed country music into living rooms all across America. She was on top of the world. She had a streak of #1 hits, a room full of awards, a hit TV show, and the love of millions. She was a trailblazer who blew the doors open for future generations of female artists. From the outside, her life looked like a perfect, glittering success story. But behind the scenes, a storm was gathering, and a single, horrific moment was about to change everything, planting the tragic seed that would eventually grow into the myth of her sad life. September 11, 1984. For Barbara Mandrell, this date drew a sharp line in her life. There was the before, and there was the after. She was at the peak of her career, just 35 years old, driving home with her two kids, 14-year-old Matthew and 8-year-old Jamie. They were on a familiar road near their home in Nashville when the unthinkable happened. A car, driven by a 19-year-old college student named Mark White, crossed the center line and smashed head-on into Mandrell's Jaguar. The impact was catastrophic. Mark White was killed instantly. Mandrell and her children were critically injured. First responders who arrived on the scene of twisted metal and shattered glass would later say that, based on the wreckage, no one should have survived. Mandrell's injuries were horrific: a severely broken femur, a shattered ankle, a badly damaged knee, and countless cuts. Worst of all was a severe concussion, a brain injury that would have lasting, invisible consequences. Her children were also hurt, but thankfully, they recovered and were released from the hospital much sooner. For Barbara, the road back would be long, painful, and life-altering. She was rushed into surgery, which kicked off a year and a half of medical procedures and grueling rehab. The physical pain was constant, but the psychological trauma was, in many ways, even more devastating. The head injury was disorienting. It scrambled her memory and personality, creating a rift between the woman she had been and the person she now was. In interviews years later, she'd talk about her old self in the third person, saying things like, "That was her," or "She did that." It was as if the confident, vibrant superstar was a totally different person she couldn't connect with anymore. She admitted that the brain injury caused her to stutter and that for a while, she cussed like crazy, a common but shocking side effect for patients with head trauma. A deep depression followed. "I never thought I would ever sing again or be Barbara Mandrell again," she confessed. The world saw a resilient star fighting her way back, but in private, she was grappling with immense pain, confusion, and a profound loss of her own identity. But in all that darkness, there was a small miracle. Mandrell and her kids weren't consistent seatbelt users. Just moments before the crash, while stopped at a light, she saw children playing unsafely in another car. A wave of unease washed over her, and she told her kids to buckle up, fastening her own belt as well. It was a simple, almost random act. But she has no doubt that this split-second decision is the only reason they survived. The accident became the tragic centerpiece of her public story. It was the moment her unstoppable career slammed into a brick wall. It was the event that scarred her and changed the course of her life forever. And while she did eventually return to the stage, the Barbara who came back was different. The crash had planted a seed of doubt, a deep question about the price of fame and the fragility of life. This single event became the easy explanation for her eventual retirement, but the real reasons were far more complex and deeply misunderstood. The public narrative of tragedy had started, but the private reality was just beginning to take shape. If you're finding this story as compelling as we do and believe in getting to the truth behind the headlines, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps us share more important stories like this one. Now, let's get back to the misunderstood aftermath and the real reasons Barbara Mandrell chose to leave it all behind. After more than a year of agonizing recovery, Barbara Mandrell did the impossible. She came back. In May 1985, she stepped back into the recording studio. The first single she released, "There's No Love in Tennessee," became a top 10 hit, a powerful symbol of her resilience and her fans' loyalty. She put out more albums, went on tour, and even took on some acting roles. It looked like a triumphant return. But under the surface, the fallout from the accident was creating a new, very public storm. Almost exactly a year after the crash, in September 1985, the headlines were shocking. Barbara Mandrell was suing the family of Mark White, the young man who died in the accident, for $10.3 million. The public backlash was immediate and brutal. To many, it looked like a rich celebrity trying to profit from a tragedy by going after a grieving family. Her fan mail, once filled with well wishes, turned into angry letters. Her record and ticket sales slumped. The image of the wholesome, beloved entertainer was shattered, replaced by the perception of greed, but that narrative was a painful distortion of a legal and financial mess. The truth was far more complicated. At the time, Tennessee state law required that for Mandrell to collect from her own insurance policy to cover her massive medical bills and lost income, she first had to file a lawsuit against the at-fault driver's estate. It was a legal formality, a hoop she had to jump through to force her own insurance company to pay what it owed. Her legal team immediately reached out to the White family to explain, assuring them she didn't want a penny from them personally and that this was just a necessary legal step. The young man's father, Richard J. White, even stated publicly that he understood, saying, "She's not out to hurt me and mine." As I understand it, being named in the suit as a defendant is sort of a legal technicality. But the headlines didn't care about the details. Mandrell was crushed by the public's perception of her. "I'm not blaming the public," she said years later. "Given the information most of them got, I would have felt the way they felt." To make a horrible situation even worse, her own insurance company then filed for bankruptcy before the case was settled. The lawsuit, which she called devastating to her image, left a deep scar. It taught her a harsh lesson about how quickly public perception could be twisted and how the fame machine could turn on you. The experience planted a deep desire for a life away from the spotlight, where her actions weren't up for public debate. Just 5 days before that controversial lawsuit was filed, on September 6, 1985, Barbara Mandrell gave birth to her third child, a son named Nathaniel. His birth felt like nothing short of a miracle. She'd had complications during the pregnancy and was told she might have had a miscarriage. She and Ken spent an entire night praying, believing their baby was gone. The next morning, an ultrasound showed a perfectly healthy baby boy, alive and sucking his thumb. She would later call him her miracle. The birth of Nathaniel, coming almost exactly a year after the crash that nearly killed her and her other children, changed everything. It completely shifted her perspective. The accident had shown her just how fragile life was. The birth of her son showed her what truly mattered. Her 2 older children were growing up fast, and now she had a newborn. Suddenly, the relentless grind of touring, recording, and managing a huge career felt a lot less important than being there for her family. Her decision to retire, which she officially announced in 1997, wasn't about giving in to industry pressure or past trauma. It was a conscious, deliberate choice to put her role as a mother and wife first. She was nearing 50, an age where staying on top of the country charts is tough for anyone, but her decision was about more than her career. It was about reclaiming her life. When her son Nathaniel was in high school, she knew the time was right to step away for good. Her final concert, held at the Grand Ole Opry House in October 1997, was called The Last Dance. It was her final bow on the stage she considered home. And to make sure she wouldn't be tempted to come back, she did something both shocking and symbolic. She sold all of her musical instruments. The tools of her trade, the very extensions of her soul, the steel guitar, the banjo, the saxophone, were all sold. It was a definitive statement. She wasn't taking a break. She was closing a chapter for good. The myth says a tragedy made her disappear. The reality is, a blessing made her leave. So what about those headlines claiming Barbara Mandrell, now 76, is living a sad and reclusive life? This is where the myth completely falls apart. The idea of a tragic, lonely figure just doesn't match the reality of her life today. Barbara Mandrell didn't fade into obscurity. She intentionally built a wall of privacy around a life that is, by all credible accounts, happy and deeply fulfilling. She lives a quiet, content life in Tennessee with Ken Dudney, her husband of over 55 years. Their love story is one of the most enduring in the industry, a partnership that started when he was the drummer in her family's band and has weathered fame, tragedy, and retirement. Her life isn't empty, it's full of the very things she chose over her career. She is a devoted mother to her 3 children, Matthew, Jamie, and Nathaniel, and a doting grandmother. After decades of pouring her energy into her audience, she now pours it into her family. The whole reason she stepped away, her days are not spent longing for her old life. Instead, she's filled them with passions that bring her joy. She's an avid gardener, finding peace in tending to her plants. Her home is her sanctuary, where she enjoys painting, making mosaics, and simply taking care of her house. She once joked, "I have so much to do, I don't know when I found time to work." That is not the sentiment of a woman mourning her past. It's the voice of someone who has found true contentment in a different kind of work. Her faith, always a pillar in her life, has only deepened. She is active in her church community and has said that, except for in church, she hasn't sung professionally since 1997. Her life is grounded in her relationship with God, her family, and her country. As for her health, there are no credible reports that she's unwell. When she makes rare public appearances, she looks strong and vibrant. In July 2022, she returned to the Grand Ole Opry to celebrate her 50th anniversary as a member, looking radiant. More recently, in March 2025, she made a special appearance at the Opry's 100th anniversary celebration. Seated on stage, she smiled and swayed along as Kelsea Ballerini paid tribute to her, looking every bit the graceful icon, not a tragic recluse. Financially, she is more than secure, with an estimated net worth of around $50 million. She isn't isolated by hardship, she is private by choice. The famous mansion she once lived in, Fontanelle, was turned into a tourist attraction, but she has long since moved to a home that gives her the peace and normalcy she always wanted. The story of Barbara Mandrell at 76 isn't sad. It's the story of a woman who reached the pinnacle of success and had the wisdom to know when to walk away. She traded the roar of the crowd for the quiet of her garden. She traded #1 hits for time with her grandchildren. She didn't lose the spotlight. She simply redirected it onto the life she truly wanted. In the world of celebrity, we love a simple, dramatic story. A star rises, a tragedy hits, and they vanish into a sad, lonely existence. This is the myth that has been constructed around Barbara Mandrell. It's a story that focuses on the horror of a car crash and the perceived injustice of a lawsuit, painting her retreat as some inevitable, tragic decline, but the truth is so much more inspiring. The reality is that Barbara Mandrell's story isn't a tragedy at all, it's a triumph of self-determination. The car accident didn't just break her body, it reshaped her entire outlook on life. The public backlash didn't just hurt her career, it cemented her desire for a genuinely private life. And the birth of her son wasn't just a happy occasion, it was the final push she needed to make a courageous choice. She looked at the life of a superstar, the brutal schedules, the constant scrutiny, the endless demands, and she chose something else. She chose her family. She chose her faith. She chose herself. Selling her instruments wasn't an act of defeat, it was an act of total commitment to her new life. So, while some may see a star who disappeared after a disaster, the reality is a woman who chose her family over fame. Barbara Mandrell's story isn't a sad ending, it's a powerful lesson in redefining success on your own terms. She didn't disappear. She just went home. What do you think about Barbara Mandrell's decision to walk away from fame at the peak of her career? Is her story an inspiration? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories behind the music.